Check 1 2, check 1 2.
1, 2, 3, 4 steps I take from my bed to the floor. 5, 6, 7, 8. Will today be rough or will today be great? 9, 10, 11, 12. Lately I've been going through hell. 13, 14, 15, 16. Today's the day. Are you coming? Are you sick of being normal? I'm sick of being average. I'm sick of being mortal. I'm about to be a savage. I see a lot of things that I want, I will have them. I got a new mindset that I just established. I'll march through the cold with the nails on the pavement. I'll shovel that coal just to get out the basement. My story will be told, helping others make changes. I'll be so bold, they will watch in amazement.
Am I gonna face it? Am I gonna chase it? Am I gonna start over? I keep waiting. Time is limited, quickly fading. Get my mind right, it's my time to take it. Am I gonna face it? Am I gonna chase it? Am I gonna start over? I keep waiting. Time is limited, quickly fading. Get my mind right, it's my time to take it.
Foot up on the pedal, pushing hard to the metal. Make a deal with the devil. Channel rage through my vessel into something that is special. Energy of a rebel, going up a level. I just wanna be greatness. I could feel changes, turn a new page and tie up my laces. I will be the bravest, break out of my cages. I will not be nameless, I will not be aimless.
Am I gonna chase it? Am I gonna start over? I keep waiting. Time is limited, quickly fading. Get my mind right, it's my time to take it. Am I gonna face it? Am I gonna chase it? Am I gonna start over? I keep waiting. Time is limited, quickly fading. Get my mind right, it's my time to take it.
How y'all doing tonight? All right, so we're doing night 2 of Jimmy Akin versus, I was going to say El Gato Erhman, but, oh my crap, this thing's stuck. Okay, there we go. Okay, so I rewatched all the stuff that followed after this debate. I watched Jimmy Akin's analysis. I watched people talking about how great Jimmy Akin is, and I read Bart Ehrman's blog about the debate. So I have kind of a fuller picture of what happened that I obviously couldn't have had back then when I watched it for the first time. So let's go ahead and jump right into it. I'm going to do it at 1.25 speed, and let's continue this analysis, shall we? Remember, this is all in the lead up to Jimmy Akin versus James White. I just want to see what kind of mistakes Jimmy is prone to and where his strengths are for when we analyze him versus James. We all know James's weaknesses and strengths. So, all right, let's do this.
Right. Well, thank you. Thank you, Jimmy. Again, I agree with most of that. Yeah. Jimmy, do you think there are things in the Gospels that the Gospel writers invented rather than recording things that actually happened?
I think that there are situations like when a sick person comes up to Jesus and says, please heal me, that they would reconstruct what such a person would likely have said.
Yeah. But I mean, are there stories that you think were not historical that are in the Gospels?
I don't think there are entire stories that are, no.
What about like in Matthew's Gospel?
Reconstruct what such a person would likely have said.
Yeah. But I mean, are there stories that you think were not historical that are in the Gospels?
I don't think there are entire stories.
Hi, Pixie.
What about like in Matthew's gospel where Jesus dies and these people come out of the tombs and they wander around? You think that's something that actually happened?
Well, the Gospels record that Jesus rose from the dead, and they record that Lazarus rose from the dead, and Jairus' daughter rose from the dead, and the widow of Nain's son rose from the dead. So I don't see why other people couldn't have risen from the dead as well.
No, I'm just wondering what you thought.
Yeah.
So, yeah, good. So, do you think Jesus was born in Bethlehem?
Yes, I do.
I don't know why he's answering like this. If you watch, not the second debrief, if you watch if you watch the not the second debrief with Matt Fradd, but you watch the original debrief with Trent Horn, he clears up all the nonsense that he says here, like throughout the whole debate. He just clears it up. And then I guess people told him that he won, and then he just went back on any of the clarification he gave. Oy vey.
How do you account for the fact that Matthew and Luke disagree about how it happened?
Tux, if you want to come in to comment on any of this, I can send you an internal link through Streamlabs. It is possible to do 2 people. We just can't do more than 2. That's the only thing. Unless I have Stream Ninja, and I don't know how to work that, and I don't want to do that on live stream. Be trying to learn something.
I'll answer, but in what respect do you have in mind?
In Luke, there's a census. They're from Nazareth. And in Luke, they have to go to Bethlehem. And while they're there to register for the census, it happens to be the time when Mary was in the lake and gave birth. In Matthew...
Well, let's stop there. I'll answer that one, then you hit me with your next one.
Well, no, this is the same question. I'm showing the contradiction between the two.
No, I meant...
Oh, okay, yeah.
But,
okay, go ahead. Yeah.
So that's not a contradiction. That's a selection difference.
Oh, no, I haven't given the contradiction.
Then you have
Yeah. No, that's not. There's no contradiction there. That's just Luke's account. Right? And they go for a census. Whereas in Matthew, they're in Bethlehem, and they flee to Egypt. But when they come back from Egypt, they want to go back to Judea, but they can't. That shows that their home is in Judea, and so they relocate to Nazareth. So in one of them, they're from Nazareth, and in the other, they're from Bethlehem. So how do you?
I think that my own view is that they had homes in more than one place. That Joseph was originally from Bethlehem, so he had property there, and he moved to Nazareth for work, and he had property there.
Historically, you think that he had 2 homes?
Yeah. At least I think he was part owner of the family estate in Bethlehem.
So you think they got sizable income?
Well, I think that they were economically deprived enough he had to leave Bethlehem for work.
But he's maintaining a home in both places. That's an interesting idea. I hadn't thought of that. I mean, it's a little bit. We know a lot about Judaism in the first century, and I'm trying to think if we know of anybody from the lower classes who has 2 homes in 2 different locations. I don't think I know that as a phenomenon.
Well, I'm not saying how common it was, but it seems to me that's the straightforward way to read this. And I don't suspect that Joseph had palatial estate, because they were from the lower class, as you say.
So if that's,
he may have just been part owner of the family estate.
Part owner of the family estate. So I don't understand, though, then if he got a home in Nazareth and a home in Bethlehem, and they're coming back from Egypt, why does it say that they can't go where they want to go to Bethlehem, that they have to go to Nazareth? And why wouldn't he just naturally go there?
Matthew explains that because he says that he didn't go to Bethlehem because Archelaus was the ruler in that part of the country, and he knew how bad Archelaus was, so they diverted to the other place that they lived, which was Nazareth.
Tex, I'm going to send you an email, and if you want to hop in, you have to use this link to get in, okay?
I guess the problem with it, is that the studies of the economy of first century Palestine show that people who are doing the kinds of work that apparently Joseph is doing, he's called a tectile, he translates the carpenter, somebody works with a hand. It's a very low level kind of, they didn't have much money. People lived hand to mouth, and they didn't have multiple residences. So I think it's an interesting idea. How about the genealogies? Do you think that Matthew's and Luke's genealogies, in Matthew, as you know, in the 2 of them, you have descent from a different son of David, and then the grandfathers are different, great-grandfather, and the lines are different all the way. So how do you reconcile that?
Well, so let's take a secular comparison. The current ruler, now you mentioned David lives 1,000 years before Jesus,
Yep.
and the current ruler of England is Queen Elizabeth II. So we go from the 21st century all the way back to the 11th century. Who was her ancestor then? Well, one of them was William the Conqueror, French king who conquered England. How is Queen Elizabeth descended from William the Conqueror? Actually, in multiple ways. And this is not just true of her, but lots of them. In particular, Queen Elizabeth is descended from William the Conqueror by his son, Henry I of England, and by his daughter, Saint Adela of Normandy.
Can I just interrupt you? Because
Sure.
I see where you're going with this, but in Matthew and Luke, it isn't that way. They're naming the precise father.
Right, I'll get there.
Okay?
So, Queen Elizabeth is descended from William the Conqueror in multiple ways. And at some point, those lines merge. Well, Luke and Matthew are recording Jesus' descent from David for perfectly straightforward reasons. At the time of the Babylonian exile, the prophet Jeremiah cursed Jeconiah, the last king of Israel before the exile, and said no son of his will sit on the throne. Well, there was a resulting confusion about did he mean his immediate son or none of his descendants. And so in Judaism, there's been a controversy about does the Messiah need to come from the line of Solomon or the line of Nathan? And those are the two lines that Luke and Mark mention. So Luke says he's descended from Nathan. So if you think that he can't be descended from Solomon, well, he's also descended from David by Nathan. But if you think he must be descended from Solomon, Matthew records he's also descended from Solomon. So at some point, these lines meet for Jesus, just like they do for Queen Elizabeth too.
Okay, can I just ask which one is right?
Both right. Because according to Jesus' family...
No. You said that some people thought he could not descend from Jeconiah. And so did he descend from Jeconiah or not?
He did descend from Jeconiah through the Solomon line, which is preserved in Matthew.
How far distant is Jeconiah from Solomon?
About 500 years.
So why are there differences between them before that?
Because Luke is preserving the Nathan line, and Matthew is preserving the
Okay,
Solomon
so I'll
line.
just, all I'll say is, all you need to do is read this. This isn't just kind of a crazy liberal thing. Raymond Brown, a great Catholic
He's
scholar.
not a crazy liberal?
Yeah.
That was a mistake,
Yeah,
Jimmy.
Crazy liberal. The greatest Catholic biblical scholar of the 20th century. I think he was.
I would give him his props.
Yeah. So, so this is not some kind of, it's father to son all the way, and they're different lines. And so, okay, well, let's move on to something else, because we are running out of time.
I would say very briefly, I have more answers on that. I won't take time now since Bart wants to move on. But go to jimmyakin.com/Bart and read the articles on the genealogies.
And if you
Again,
really,
another
if you really
mistake.
want to read, read Raymond Brown's book, The Birth of the Messiah, where he discusses these things at great length. And he I don't know if you all, do everybody know Ray Brown? He's a Catholic.
Tux, I sent you a link to your email.
One of the great Catholic
The email from your channel.
Vatican II. And people like him and John Meyer and Joseph Meyer, these are all great Catholics.
So there's a bias against some specific Catholic theologians that go against, or not go against, but so let's back up. Catholic apologetics, Catholic Answers apologetics, the apostolate is focused on reaching out to Protestants. So they adopt a lot of Protestant speaking points to show the Protestants they can come over to the Catholic side. Tux, no problem. And there's no rush. So if it takes a second or two to figure out the system or to get in, just let me know. But I already do have the stream together thing set up. So just let me know if it doesn't pick up your camera, and I'll open up with the source. But Catholic Answers is trying to get Protestants to come over to Catholicism. So they take up a lot of Protestant talking points. This is actually one of the, before Tyler Marshall became insane, this was actually one of his complaints against Catholic Answers. So there can be a Catholic in good standing who's definitely in heaven who these apologists disagree with. Okay? But Jimmy Akin downplaying credible scholarship is not a good move. And it doesn't look good. And I'm worried he's going to do something like that with James White. Well, James White is going to try to get a gotcha. And instead of responding properly to the gotcha and fighting back, pushing back, saying why that's not appropriate, instead he's just going to, give a mocking Catholic inside house joke that's not going to play to a Protestant audience and not going to play to the wider audience that's watching it, that's listening in.
Oh, you just agree. So anyway, okay. Do you think that if in Luke's gospel, Jesus tells the disciples after the resurrection, don't leave me?
Also, I've been working on, based on everything that I've heard from Jimmy Akin since, I'm going to write a very short, it might be my video for the week, version of what I think his argument should have been. Based on what he has said, his argument was meant to be, not based on what I would prefer him to say. But that being said, there's really, the point of these two genealogies, even if you're not trying to be a literalist about it, is that Jesus is Jesus' line is tied into every major patriarchal figure because they're tied into all Jewish people. He's all Jews. He's connected to all Jewish people. He's, I know people like to say Paul that he's the most Jewish of the Pharisees. He's the most Jewish Jew. Jesus is supposed to represent all the Jewish lineage. He's the new king. He's a restart, a refresh. So yeah, that there's another way that Jimmy Akin could have tackled this, but because of his outreach to Protestants, he didn't do that.
They still there 40 days later. Do you think that's right? They did not leave Jerusalem?
I think this is another selection issue. We have Matthew indicating that they did go to Galilee, and we have Luke only mentioning that they stayed in Jerusalem. But as John reveals to us, both of those are true. In John chapter 20, it's the day of the resurrection. Jesus appeared, and a week later, Jesus appears to the disciples in Jerusalem. Then they go to Galilee. And in John 21, we read about what happened in Galilee.
Right.
So by the time Pentecost rolls around, they've come back to Jerusalem for the travel feast, and Jesus tells them at that point, don't leave until afterwards.
Okay, but in Luke's gospel, he tells them that on the day of the resurrection. It's quite explicit that he rises from the dead. That day he meets the two disciples on the road to Emmaus. That day he appears to the disciples. He immediately tells them, that day, don't leave Jerusalem, and they're still there 40 days.
And the night of, or the week of the original debate, I think it was that very night, I made a video and I read out the passage in two different Catholic translations, in the NAB and the CTS. So that's at the time, the official Bible of Australia and the official Bible of the United States. And both translations have it all in one day. And I do make a mistake, a funny little joke, because at the time I would do 1 hour of cardio every day, and I was doing 6 miles a day, 7 miles a day. But yeah, it would have been maybe a 2 hour, 3 hour walk. So it's not an insane walk, the walk to Erhman. Anyway.
3 days later. Is that not right?
It is not right.
It is right.
No, because Luke doesn't say.
Oh, he does. He does. Every point is, on that day, at that same time, at that hour, read Luke 24.
So Jimmy Akin has a different understanding of that because each progressive one gets less concise. Each progressive statement of that day, that hour, that day, that whatever. By the time you get to the end, it's not being as clear. So he thinks that leaves open space for more time to have passed. That's his argument. That's not my argument. And I don't read Koine Greek, so I'm not going to even try to pretend to go there. But yeah.
And you'll see exactly what it is.
My memory of the text is different.
I looked at it an hour before we came to make sure. Am I right about this?
And Jimmy Akin actually examined it afterwards to make sure that his opinion was correct as well. So both men's opinion stands even with the text directly in front of them.
Yep, it is. So he tells them that day don't leave Jerusalem. Okay. And so Matthew says they immediately went to Galilee.
I think there's more flexibility in there, and actually at jimmyakin.com/Bart, there's a whole thing about how the resurrection accounts fit together. But at most, you would have Luke be wrong about a minor detail. What day did he give them?
A minor detail about about the resurrection thing. Did Jesus appear? If he did, when?
I think there's more
And
flexibility
where?
in there, and
Mark
actually
says,
at
at the beginning, he didn't tell anybody. Matthew says he appeared in Galilee. Luke says he appeared only in Jerusalem. Are these all correct? If they're not all correct, is any of them correct? That's the issue. It's not a minor issue. It's not a dating issue.
Luke does not say Jesus appeared only.
Oh, yes, it does.
Jerusalem. No, it doesn't.
But you all look it up. And also look up in Acts chapter 1, verse 3, where it says that Jesus stayed with them for 40 days in Jerusalem. Look it up. Okay, my time's up, I'm afraid to say, because Jimmy, I'd love to do this for longer, but I think now it's your turn to get me.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, Tux, did you have any luck? Let me know so I can turn on your screen over here on the on Streamlabs so they can see you if you're already in. Sorry, everybody, that I was distracted for a second while I was sending Tux the link. I know I missed a little bit of Jimmy Akin making some faux pas, but that's okay.
Try to put them together, then you're essentially writing your own gospel. And he encouraged us to read the gospel. Part he said was that if you read the gospels and try to put them together, then you're essentially writing your own gospel. And he encouraged us to read the gospels individually and see what each author has to say, what themes is he stressing, and so forth. And I agree, we should do that. We should see what is an individual author claiming, what are his themes, what's he implying, and so forth. But I don't think that means that we should just read everybody in isolation and not try to piece them together to figure out what the historical figure behind all the sources is. In fact, that's part of what the criterion of multiple attestation does.
I have a screen set up for you underneath Bart.
To see what you can figure out based on those sources about the history that the different sources are describing. And if you find a given story about Jesus attested in multiple different sources, that tells you something about it that's valuable. Well, here I have not 4 Gospels, but 4 biographies of Abraham Lincoln. This one by David Herbert Donald is considered the best by many people. It's just called Lincoln. There are others, though, like the Real Lincoln, the Lincoln Enigma, and the Lincoln No One Knows. And they all have different viewpoints. Now, what I would tend to do is read each book individually and understand what the individual author is saying, but then I would compare it with things mentioned in the other books and say, okay, what can I figure about Abraham Lincoln and what happened in his life that led to the different accounts? And I would be a detective. I would put together clues from the different biographies to construct my own understanding of what the history of Abraham Lincoln was. My question, Bart Erhman, do you think that's how I should do it with Abraham Lincoln? And if I should do it that way with Abraham Lincoln, why shouldn't I do it with the Gospels and Jesus Christ?
If you've got those 4 accounts and they contradict each other on a lot of points, then you're not going to be able simply to combine them in order to see what actually happened. You're going to have to decide which of these is accurate. If one says that...
I see, and I think Bart Erhman is a little bit wrong here. I think that some of the secular scholarship is wrong here because I think different books can be right about different things. Jimmy Akin tried horribly in yesterday's portion to describe the gist, but basically there's telescoping, there's paraphrasing, and there's gisting, which basically just means summarizing in their own words what happened. And they're using a common source. Bart Erhman and other scholars will call it Q. Most Catholics and Protestants will say it's the original author, meaning, I don't know, I know some Protestants will go into autographs, but let's not talk about that. But at least the original oral source of each tradition, whether that oral source is the school that developed that tradition or the original person who spoke it in Aramaic. So through inspiration and through guidance, that means that the important parts that needed to be in there are still in there. And so you can figure out through kind of combining them which one's true, which one's not true, and what aspect is being concentrated on one, what aspect is being concentrated on the other. And they're each one telling their own version based on both the society or the school, the church that shaped it, and and based on what really, supposedly happened and their understanding of it. So the audience, and then also the writer's capability or the storyteller's capability. So they're all true. They're just not 100% accurate to how it might have actually happened. But by having 4 different testaments, 4 different testimonies, you can kind of put together a picture or a photo of it. It's like if you were in a court case and you had 4 different witnesses with 4 slightly different stories. This is the normal way that Catholics, including Jimmy Akin, have explained it in their own apologetical works. Why he took the weird, almost Protestant approach in his opening statement, I still don't understand. He eventually gets to the Catholic talking point, but it takes him so long to get there that, as I read in Bart Erhman's blog, he has no idea what Jimmy Akin was trying to do, and he just, as far as he can understand, because he's never debated a Catholic and he hasn't dealt with Catholics, according to his blog at that time, he just assumes Jimmy Akin is is a Catholic that thinks like a Protestant. That's all that he thinks. And Jimmy Akin couldn't be further from the truth, that couldn't be further from the truth when it comes to Jimmy Akin. Yes, he's a former Protestant, but he's so esoteric and he's so interesting and weird and awkward that he's nowhere trying to mimic or even he's not even giving burnt meat to the Protestants. He's not even giving tofu to the Protestants. Yeah, he's trying to convert them over, but he's not agreeing with them. So I don't know why he took this approach. I know that he thinks that he was playing nice and trying to convince, because he didn't want to end up in the same situation that he saw James White get into with Bart Ehrman, where James White tried to push his authority over Bart, and Jimmy Akin being the most sought after apologist in the United States, in the English-speaking world. He is the thinking man's apologist in Catholicism. He is the one that everyone goes to, including bishops, including priests. And people have called him out on his blogs for being that authoritative. Just like I've called out, not Tim Staples, I like Tim Staples. The other guy who I like, Trent Horn, for getting a little bit too into himself. Jimmy Akin, he can say something and everybody in the Catholic world will immediately, even if they don't know that he's right, they're going to take him seriously and they're going to look into his claims. And he didn't want to do that with Bart. He didn't want to talk to Bart the way that he talks to his audience. And I get that. He hasn't earned that trust with Bart, but I still think this was a mistake to do it this way, no matter how many Christians like him for it.
That Lincoln was assassinated in John Ford Theater, and another second.
Jimmy Akin is the top apologist for Catholics. Everyone goes to him. Everyone. He's inundated by questions all the time. I tried to see what degrees he had. I couldn't find anything. Maybe he has a bachelor's. I know he went to college, but he is the apologist, the Catholic apologist that people go to. He is the guy. He's the man. Maybe it's his lack of further education is the reason why he's not the head apologist. I know he's the senior apologist, but he's not the head apologist for Catholic Answers. Or it could be that he likes to keep himself humble. Yeah, in a way, William Lane Craig, most people view William Lane Craig as under Jimmy Akin in the Catholic world, but yeah, he is the William Lane Craig, I guess, of Catholicism. That would work. Yeah.
He was assassinated on the way to John Ford Theater, then you have to decide. And you wouldn't be able to say these are both accurate.
Okay? You would agree, though, that in principle, comparing different sources to figure out the historical figure behind them is a good thing to do.
And the reason it's a good thing is because each individual source is not reliable. So the historical process of what you're calling of multiple attestation is, the reason you use multiple attestation to figure out what happened in the life of Jesus is because we have these multiple sources. We've got Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. We don't have other sources that can help us. And these four are so much at odds with each other that you can't just read one of them.
Did you all hear anything I said in the last 2 minutes, or did I mute myself? Let me know.
Know what actually happened. And so what you have to do is to figure out if there's some material that's in common among, not the four sources, obviously, because as I said before, Matthew, Mark, and Luke themselves used earlier.
Okay, so short summary of what I just said is that I am going to be doing a... Okay. Let me get you, brother. Okay, hold on. Screen display. Tux. Okay, you have a strong signal, so let me see what it takes to get you in. There you are. There you are, buddy. Can you say anything? Okay, you need to turn on your mic from your end. I've had this problem before. I'm going to put you on stream already, though, okay? Put you on streamer yet, or wait till you get sound? Okay. Sound. There's a setting on there for sound. I'm going to keep the video playing while you're finding it. No, that's not going to be good. I don't have any sound on you, man. It's in the settings. The last guest that I interviewed had a issue finding it.
Sources. And so what the historian looks for are independent sources that say the same thing, because so often they say different things. And so the historical task then is to figure out where they agree independently, given the fact they disagree so often.
So let's talk about differences and similarities. In my second statement, I mentioned that
sign language sucks.
Simply selecting certain material does not make a contradiction. It doesn't make it wrong, and you agreed with that. I also mentioned two other things. One of them was paraphrase. Do you think that the evangelists paraphrase what Jesus said?
I got your volume all the way up on my end.
And when they paraphrase but communicate the same basic meaning, do you think that is a contradiction, or do you think it's not?
I think not.
Okay, good. I agree. So I won't let the guys in the white coats know about that. The third ancient writing practice I mentioned was...
I'm changing sound sources on mine.
Or topically. I assume you agree that the evangelists sometimes organize material topically, like Matthew collects different ethical teachings of Jesus together in the Sermon on the Mount, and he collects different prophetic teachings together in the Olivet Discourse. Do you think he is committing an error by doing that?
It depends what you mean. I mean, it makes for a much better way of telling an account. The Sermon on the Mount is 3 chapters in Matthew, Matthew 5, 6, and 7, and much of that material is also found in Luke in different places. And so I think it makes for a more pleasing account when Matthew's done that, because you have this fantastic sermon. But the question we're asking isn't whether it's an acceptable practice for others to do that, which they do in the ancient world. We're asking whether it can be whether it's historically reliable. Did Jesus give a Sermon on the Mount, now found in chapters 5, 6? In other words, is it the sermon he gave? It's a very basic question. Did Jesus give the Sermon on the Mount? And, he may have, but the fact that he's organized these speeches, if you're saying that he's actually taken disparate materials and put them together into the sermon.
All right, I'm going to show you on my end, okay?
Did not give the Sermon on the Mount.
I'll show you where it is.
You would agree he gave sermons at times. Yes. Okay. I think this is a Mr. Spock moment, because in Matthew, in the Sermon on the Mount, what I care about as a reader, and this would be true whether I was an ancient reader, and it's certainly true of me as a modern reader, is not, did Jesus say all of these things at the same time? Instead, what I care about is, did Jesus say these things? Yeah. And so as long as Jesus really...
So it should be right there under where it says settings.
Don't infer from Matthew that
Mike
he
source.
every single one of them on the same day.
Yeah, no, he might be historically wrong about there being a one-time thing.
And there's the Mr. Spock bit, because I wouldn't call that being historically wrong. Okay. Because for someone to be wrong, they have to be making a claim. And I don't think Matthew is literally claiming these all were given at one occasion on the same day, any more than I think Mr. Chekhov is literally claiming we're going to get to the planet in 2 hours and 0 seconds.
Do you think that Matthew is literally claiming that Jesus rose 3 days later?
Within the meanings of those terms, yes, as they were understood at the time. It's on the third day.
You think it was 3 days later? So he's literal about this, but not that.
Yeah, and I think the job of a scholar and a historian is to...
I think that's kind of a low blow that Jimmy just throws out. He kind of stabs him in the ribs a little bit. But, I mean, it's not really a low blow. But I think that was an unfair shot at Bart. I do think that... I noticed that all the quote-unquote secular scholars, even the ones that are actually Christian, seem to have a lot of trouble with the flipping back between what's metaphorical and what's literal. And I think that just comes with leaving Christianity and with looking for I don't know, when you stop looking at inspiration and typology and you start looking for literalness, and I think coming from a literal background hurts them.
You learn the rules of the genre well enough that you can tell when something is literal and when it's not. Like if I say to you, I really enjoyed our debate tonight, Bart, thanks a million. Well, I'm not literally thanking you a million times. And you recognize that because you're a native speaker of English. But none of us are native speakers of the genre in which the Gospels are written. We have to learn that.
Yeah, no, that's actually, I completely agree with that. The problem is that the genre that they're written on are ancient biographies, not modern biographies. And ancient biographies are notoriously, historically unreliable. When you read Suetonius or Plutarch or these people writing biographies of Alexander the Great or Julius Caesar, you just know that there's stuff in here that is not accurate, and you say, well, that's, they're making this stuff up. Thucydides will say, for example, Thucydides will say that that the speeches that he gives, of course you know what the people actually said. How would you know what they said?
Up to 11 people can join.
Jesus gave the Sermon on the Mount. Matthew was written 50 years later in a different language from Jesus by somebody who wasn't
No,
there.
I can't post leaks in that.
How
Okay,
would
hold
you
on.
replicate 3 chapters? Think about what you would do if you
I
had to
want
replicate.
I want to weigh in there. Because it's my cross.
Okay. I thought I was answering your question.
And I appreciate
Yeah,
that.
okay.
So I disagree that Matthew was written 50 years later. I think Matthew was written 30 years later. I also disagree that that it was written by someone who was not there. Even if it was 50 years later, even if it was by a non-eyewitness, the question is, have these sayings been accurately preserved from the preaching ministry of Jesus down to the time that Matthew consigned them to paper? And because Jesus gave his teachings in highly memorable forms, like the first shall be last and the last shall be first, how hard is it to remember that as a saying? Because they were circulated and repeated in the Christian community, including by the people who wrote the Gospels and their immediate sources, I say we have a high reliability that these ethical teachings are well preserved, just like you have admitted that various other individual sayings of Jesus are well preserved. And speaking of an individual saying, you quoted Jesus in Mark's account on the cross.
Tux, I'm just going to switch over to...
and my God, my, why have you forsaken me?
I'm going to switch over to StreamYard.
The idea that Jesus was despairing and thought God had literally forsaken him at this moment. What is Jesus quoting when he says that?
So he's quoting Psalm 22:1, and he's only quoting verse 1. He's
And
not
how
quoting the
does
end of the gospel.
How does Psalm 22 end?
As I was saying, he doesn't quote the end of Psalm 22. He quotes the verse about being forsaken. Look, in terms of individual sayings, I would just like to respond to your earlier question to me about the individual
I don't know
sayings.
about you.
Since you asked me
Forgive
about
me,
it, I would like to answer the question about individual
I'll give
sayings.
you the opportunity in just a minute. If I'm being crucified, and your experience might be different, but if I'm being crucified and I want to signal that I'm in pain, but that I'm ultimately going to triumph, I probably won't quote all of Psalm 22 because I'm struggling to breathe, pushing myself up and down. And I would then quote the first line of the psalm.
Okay, everybody, I'm going to sign out and I'm going to come right back in, okay? I hope you all return because I actually have a good audience today. Okay. Give me 1 second and I'm going to open up StreamYard so that way all of us can get in on this, okay?